Welcome to Between the Covers, the show for readers and writers and lovers of books. I'm Stephanie, and I'm a publisher at Red Penguin Books, where we publish books of all types and genres. So, whether you have a book in your head, a manuscript ready to go, or maybe even 400 sheets of loose leaf shoved in a drawer. And yes, probably about once a month, I do get an envelope filled with loose leaf. It happens. Please visit us at redpenguinbooks.com and unleash your inner author. I'm so excited to be joined today by three authors who have definitely unleashed themselves. Our first author today, Thomas Kast, is the author of The Great Convergence, and you'll definitely want to meet him and hear all about his book. Joseph Cappa is the author of The Zodiac, Decoded, and then finally, Nathan Lewis is the author of Inflation, what it is, why it's bad, and how to fix it. But first, let's meet Thomas Kast, the author of The Great Convergence. And our author writes, 10,000 AD, a cantankerous scholar slipping into obscurity is out for revenge. He time travels to the year 2022 to stop his nemesis. Scott, a successful scientist at a competing university, from thwarting his research into the origin of a mysterious phenomenon, the Great Convergence. Shrewd and ruthless, Scott will stop at nothing to defend his tenure track. The feud quickly spins out of control, and the damage to reality grows unchecked. Caught in the crosshairs are three characters responsible for triggering the Great Convergence. An art-hating professional art critic who, unbeknownst to him, spontaneously switches between universes, wreaking havoc as he goes. A talentless artist whose sculptures act as a trans-universal portals, and a schizophrenic astrophysicist trying to avert the invasion of alternate versions of himself from different realities. As their paths converge, the apocalyptic event takes place, and the inescapable tragedy of human existence unfolds. Subversive, philosophical, science fiction, and a social satire, The Great Convergence will take you out of your comfort zone, exposing the absurdity of many ethical and intellectual ideals. Well, I can't wait to meet author Thomas Kast. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, thrilled to have you. My goodness, I don't know which of your characters I love more. The art critic who hates art, the non-talented artist, that one is fun too. This is just quite a rollicking story. How did you get the inspiration for this?
That's a good question. I guess there's a little part of me in each of the characters, although I made them particularly obnoxious. I mean, I'm a little bit obnoxious myself, but not as much. So the nameless narrator is stuck in a dead-end job, and he's frustrated with his work at university. I've been a university lecturer, and although my university career wasn't as bad, I observed several, I don't know, phenomena I would love to change. And I know that some things cannot be changed, and it reflects in my character's behavior, his sense of I don't know, injustice as he perceives it. I've been an artist, although not as unsuccessful as Jeffrey, one of the characters in my book, but I understand his struggles and his troubles. The art critic I've met in the course of my career, many art critics, and basically I'm trying to roll over them a little bit. So this is me.
I love that.
Making a stand a little bit.
Yes, it's getting to get back and make statements about all the things that have happened in your life. I think that's fabulous. Is there anyone in your life who will recognize themselves in your book?
I don't think so. No, there's nothing specific. It's all absolutely fictitious. It's just that the general vibe, I think, is there. I mean, someone who had been working at university will definitely recognize some of the
Some of the
uh,
types, the
some of
archetypes.
the issues. Yes, and artists and critics and scientists as well. So it's based on real life events, although it's all mixed together.
That's amazing. That's
I,
amazing. Tell
I
me,
actually, I'm kind of curious because I haven't read the book, but I sense that we've kind of come to the end of the line of the modernist art experiment, and we're kind of disgusted with it. And we've also kind of come to the end of the line of the current university structure, and we're kind of disgusted with that. And certainly you're reacting to that, but out of that, when we turn the lights off on all that, we then have transition to something new. And I wonder if you're kind of feeling that we're ready for something new there.
great question.
Well, ready or not, the change is coming. I suppose there's people I don't know, digest media in a different way. The university has a competition. There are many online courses, and basically you don't need a degree to actually be able to do something. I think education is really important. How do you obtain it? Not as much. And I think this is my personal view. The hierarchy of the universities is make it impossible for many, especially young people, to figure out their way in life. And especially in the States, I understand that it's not like in Europe. In Europe, university is for free, but in the States, you have to pay for it. You end up heavily in debt, learning things that people change minds, and it's okay that after a year or two, you say, okay, well, this is not for me. I'd like to try something else, and then after like I don't know, 3,000 in the red. Well, you have to be a lawyer now.
Americans that wish they were only 30,000 in the red, from what I hear.
Yeah, I know. Yes, it gets worse.
Absolutely.
Can.
Let me ask you a question about your writing of this. On the one hand, it sounds like something that could pour out of you in stream of consciousness. But all of this time travel and all these characters, I'm almost picturing that you have an entire wall of your apartment filled with post-it notes and line graphs. Tell me about your process. How does that go?
Well, the process is very simple. I stare into the void and think a lot. And when I'm full, I try to write. And then, yes, and you're absolutely right. There's a bunch of notes and notebooks and whatnot strewn all over the apartment. And the thing is, I try to organize myself. In fact, it took me 10 years to finish the book.
Really?
Not like yeah, but it was on and off. I've been writing it and leaving for extended periods of time until I told myself, okay, that's it. I have to finish it. But it took some time and lots of discipline at the end. It went through several editors. I used quite sophisticated software to keep track of all the divergent timelines.
Oh, tell me about that. What software did you use for timelines? Because that's a
Eon
lot.
timeline. I had to create different timelines for each character, and the software allowed me to build intersections in between, and it works works nicely with another application I use for writing, Ulysses, which breaks everything down to scenes and whatnot. So basically, I'm dyslexic, so it's really difficult for me to create something complex. At the end of the day, I created something overly complex. But yes, it took a lot of time, and there is a lot going on. But anyway, I mean, if that sounds scary, I mean, I don't expect the reader to follow all of that. And this is not important. What is important is actually the characters, what's happening to them. I mean, it's their personal journey. I mean, what's really going on? Whether X hates Y, and I don't know, Z has feelings for A, B, C. Something. This is of less importance.
Yes. Yes, well, certainly in any book, all the storyline in the world is much less important than what the evolution of the characters and what they come to know about themselves and the world.
Right.
what a complex story. What is, in a sentence, what are you hoping the reader is going to gain from this?
An insight into humanity, what we are, what we do, why are we the way we are, what's the meaning of life. I hope the reader can have quite a few laughs, because it's full of humor. It's tragic, and at the same time, it's funny. I try to make it as funny as possible. Full of light philosophy, but not too heavy. I avoid spoon feeding. The book leaves you with questions rather than answers. I avoid moralizing. And there's several themes in my book. I'm sorry, I guess there's more than one sentence, but basically it's also about, it's about humans. So one of the themes that, in my book is stupidity. I mean, some of my characters are pretty smart, but they act really silly. They're blindsided. They're so concentrated on what's important to them. They just lose the picture of reality, and they act really human.
Yeah, that's so true of so many people. The saying, can't see the forest through the trees. Yes.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, tell me, is there a follow-up? What could possibly come next after this?
Well, there is not exactly a follow-up, but I'm doing a philosophical comic series. It's a philosophical sci-fi. I've finished 4 volumes already. There's 2 more to go. It will publish in the coming months, and it's a little bit different. I mean, it's not as complex. Very simple premise. Lord Babla, an evil genius living on a remote yellow planet, creates a pet thing, mutation, in order to replace his recently deceased research aide. And the pet thing is highly deficient. Now, unfortunately, the incinerator fuel is gone. So Lord Babla has to improve on what he brought into being. So he takes him across the universe and shows him the wonders of civilization. Now, the thing is that the pet thing is being mercilessly brainwashed and show things from Lord Babla's perspective. Basically, it's a bunch of colonial, horrid, statements, and he has to react. And pet thing is very naive. He asks the right questions, but get the wrong answers. And it's upon the reader to realize what's really going on. Again, it sounds like, I don't know, heavy, but it's not. It's full of humor, psychedelic imagery.
Sounds like something I definitely think people are going to want to read. That's what it sounds like to me. Absolutely.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Yes. Complex, but the simple theme that goes through the whole thing, and what characters you have created. Absolutely. What characters. We're just hoping that we're going to hear more from you, if not a tie-in with the book, but this other sci-fi series sounds completely fascinating. Thank you so much. For anybody who really wants to learn more about this universe, besides reading The Convergence, our next author shares with us the Zodiac Decoded. Joseph Cappa is the author, and he writes, finally, the true meaning of the Zodiac has been discovered. The ancient mystery has been solved. A must read, especially by the younger generation who will one day inherit this planet. Author Joseph Cappa unravels step by step the process he used in deciphering the Zodiac, revealing its true meaning. Learn for yourself that the Zodiac's story applies to all people, and it provides a message of hope, particularly relevant in these unique times. All readers, young and old, will agree that the Zodiac is truly the story of us. Please welcome our next author, Joseph Cappa. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here indeed.
Absolutely. And I must say, you're a lawyer, which struck me with that title. What kind of lawyer are you?
I actually practice trust and estates and real estate work mostly. Do some municipal court as well. But I happen to be the perfect convergence of interests that helped me to decipher the Zodiac.
Oh, okay.
I love studying ancient Greek philosophy. I love studying ancient civilizations. And as I hit middle age and I started staring into the night sky more and more, I became interested in the stars. And I became a member of Amateur Astronomers Inc. And we have a local observatory here in Cranford, New Jersey. And I started looking at the stars, and I started to become fixated on the stars of the Zodiac. And that's kind of those the three interests what led me to one day figure out, what does it mean? What do those symbols mean? Why in that order? And it's a pretty remarkable discovery. It's not only are the symbols of the Zodiac the stages of life from birth to death of an individual. Each picture is a stage of life that we all will go through, whether we marry, have children or not. We are all destined, if you live a full, ripe life, you will go through every one of those stages. You will be every character in the Zodiac wheel.
Interesting. Interesting. I've never heard that before, but that makes perfect sense as you're saying it.
Yes, I think the most easiest example is the first stage of life would be the newborn, the intelligent creature which has just navigated the waters of life. And if you look at all the Zodiac symbols, which one describes a water creature that becomes a land animal, or better yet, an intelligent creature that has navigated the waters of life, would be Capricorn, half goat, half fish, the intelligent mammal which should navigate the waters of life. And it's those kind of picturesque terms. You will find that the symbol or the description of the symbol and the description of the stage of life are the same exact words to be used. But it's more important than this, because what I learned from ancient writings, and one of the things that Plato had written, that the Zodiac ages are the ages of mankind. There's no writings anywhere in the past about them being the stages of life. That was all bleached by law about 400 AD. It became illegal to study the Zodiac. If you knew that there were actually 13 constellations of the Zodiac and not 12, bad things happen to you. Matter of fact, to this day, we still have a negative connotation with the number 13. You don't even say the word back in the Dark Ages. You didn't even say the word. And now that all the science is coming out, we now realize that it's a hidden message here, because what Plato tells us and what the Babylonian clay tablets tell us is that the theory or the first law of the universe, as above, so below, applies to the Zodiac. So if the Zodiac symbols are the stages of life of one individual, it is also, by definition, the stages of life of the entire human race. The whole human race evolves in the same stages, in the same order as an individual. And my example for that would be, we are presently entering into the age of Aquarius. We all may have heard that from back in the 60s, the song Aquarius, the age of enlightenment. Well, for an individual, the age of being at the age of Aquarius is being midlife, where you have midlife crises, and then you start to reinvent yourself in a healthier, more positive ethos. You become the bearer of the waters of your own life. So at midlife, every human being becomes the bearer of the waters of their own life. No one's coming to save them or do it for them. They are responsible for them. It's an age of enlightenment. Well, if that's true for the individual, and what I'm saying is true, then the whole human race entering the age of Aquarius should be experiencing two things. One, we should be having midlife crises all over the globe, and we are, and not just crises of water and rising sea levels and global temperatures, but crises of consciousness. Why are we celebrating people who killed people? Why do we have their statues up? Why don't we have role models statues up? Why are we celebrating Christopher Columbus, who's maybe the third or fourth worst mass murderer in human history? We should celebrate more positive. So we're having crises of conscience. But we're also, the other thing we're seeing is, just like in middle life of an individual, we should be starting to take care of Mother Earth. And since the 1960s going forward, we now have fresh air and clean water acts. We're going green. We're leaving no carbon footprint. We're recycling. We're just beginning to start to take care of our body, the earth we live on. So the whole human race is actually doing the same thing as an individual at midlife. So it's a wonderful thing. But what that tells us, if we measure in ages, it means that human civilization started around 21,700 BCE. And that it started the age of Capricorn, just like an individual would. And what it means, the age is where's the sun on the spring equinox? On March 21st, when you look up at the sun, what constellation is it in front of? Although it goes in familiar order, as we all recognize with astrology, in a counterclockwise circle every year, the sun is slowly drifting to the right. And that's where we measure ages. Where is the sun on the spring equinox? Right now, we're just entering into the age of Aquarius. You were to look up or use a cell phone app, and now you can see day or night where the sun is. You will see that the sun is just touching the splashing waters of the age of Aquarius. So we are just transitioning into, so we're just beginning to take care of Earth. We're unfortunately just in the beginning of experiencing our midlife crises. I think there's a lot of work left ahead of us. But the age of Aquarius is an age of enlightenment. And it's not by choice. We have no choice but to fix the Earth and start changing the way we do things if we want to thrive and survive in the future. The last thing I need to mention on it is there's from every age, from the age of Taurus to the bull, when you had forced religious practices, you had the bullhorn. You heard the bullhorn, you came running to mass. You came running to the temple. God help you if you didn't come. The age of Aries, the ram, we had a new concept when we had monotheism and we had a new thing. I don't have to do like the rest as long as I follow God's laws. You had the ram's horn, and we still use the ram's horn to this day. In the age of Pisces, the fish, we had the symbol for the fish, which is mostly associated with Christianity, but it's actually a sign, and this fish is a sign of the age of Pisces. And the symbol for the age of Aquarius is the rainbow. How else would you express a symbol for water in the air, in the sky? A rainbow. So if what I'm saying is true, we should be seeing the symbol of the rainbow emerging in our society at this very time. And we are. I think the rise of the rainbow generation, the rise of the LGBTQ community, the declaration of June as Pride Month, we are actually seeing the emergence of the rainbow in our society. So as I mentioned in my bio in the back of the book there, this Zodiac truly is the story of us. And we are playing it out to a script.
Now, can you then predict what is going to happen to us as a society next?
I don't know if we can do with any specificity, but just like you would know, for example, after the age of Aquarius, well, for an individual comes the age of Capricorn, senior citizen, where you once again are going to face navigating the waters of life, this time from life to death, right? Capricorn represents not only birth, but represents death. So you know that at the age of Capricorn, you've reached the end of your life cycle, so to speak, or a beginning of a new cycle. So we know, for example, many writers in the past knew would come a day, and that's where we have a lot of these ancient writings. They knew that the age of Aquarius is an age of enlightenment for the individual. So people were able to write and did write about the age of Aquarius will one day be an age of enlightenment for the whole human race. Those kind of things you can see. We can't predict what's going to happen, which natural disasters, which wars, famines, things of that nature. But we as a human race are starting to wake up. We're starting to reconnect with our past. A lot of the things that have been not taught to our children over the last 2,000 years are now coming to light. The old rhetoric that we all of a sudden magically appeared out of nowhere around 4000 BCE is now proving to be untrue. We're now finding evidence that mankind has been here for 10,000 years longer than that. And as we're seeing, and as you see in my book, we've actually had a sophisticated civilization with laws, gods, rules, goes all the way back to 21,700 BCE. We were actually a civilized people. That's when we declared ourselves a thing, and that's when the Zodiac was created. And it's one of the reasons the Zodiac is carried forward to us to this very day. It's something very important. It's the third rule of the universe. The first one is as above, so below, which, by the way, says there's other humans just like us out there. The other one is the 10 and 60 base math, which, among other things, is 60 base math measures how you measure curved things. So basically, the second rule of the universe tells us that time and space are curved and they're related. Well, we give all the accolades to Einstein for figuring that out, but actually for theorizing it, it's still not accepted, still not all the way agreed upon. But the second rule of the universe told us time and space are curved. And the third rule was the Zodiac, and we now know what it is. It's human history.
Interesting and eye-opening. You know, it's funny. I just came back from a vacation to Machu Picchu, of all places. So hearing this and all that I saw and what the Inca, years back recognized, it's so wonderful to hear that you put your research powers and your interest in ancient civilizations and such together. in such a fascinating way.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a labor of love, if you will, because once I figured it out, I became all obsessed, and it becomes very hard to do anything else but want to continue to work on my project. As a lawyer, it made it quite challenging.
I'm sure it did. So tell me, is there, I don't know, is there a follow-up to this? Could there possibly be?
Well, I think I'm going to write a book about the 3 laws of the universe, as I just mentioned at the end of my speech, because those 3 laws answer just about every philosophical question we have. The ancients who supposedly taught the Sumerian forefathers, there's only 3 rules, and all of society is based on it. And the spread of these 3 rules is actually the spread of empires from one to the other, all the way to the Romans and then to the rest of the world. So these are very important rules. And it's like somebody gave us a head start. The ancients weren't ignorant. They were actually probably far wiser and far more in tune with what it meant to exist. We are. And they gave us these rules as a guidepost. And I think that's where I'm going to focus my energies now, to try to show that the ancients taught us everything we needed to know to start with. And we've been searching, like in the dark, if you will, trying to refigure out what we were already taught to begin with.
Fascinating, fascinating. Well, when that next book is done, please join us back here so we can hear all of that.
I will.
Thanks so much. Our final author today is Nathan Lewis, the author of Inflation: What It Is, Why It's Bad, and How to Fix It. Well, we just learned about civilization, but we're facing some problems right now. Many people are out of money. And our author writes, what is behind the worst inflationary storm in more than 40 years? One that is dominating the headlines and shaking Americans by their pocketbooks. The cost of living explosion since the COVID pandemic has raised alarms about a possible return of a 1970s style great inflation. Some observers even fear a descent into the kind of Weimar style hyperinflation that has torn apart so many nations. Is this true? If so, what should be done? How should we prepare for the future? Inflation answers these and other questions in an engaging discussion that draws on the singular expertise of Steve Forbes, chairman of Forbes Media, acclaimed for his insights on money and the economy. Nathan Lewis, internationally renowned expert on money and taxation, and author and journalist Elizabeth Ames. The authors say that today's problems can be solved by discarding long-standing beliefs that helped bring on the current crisis. They include the notion that central banks can create prosperity through artificially creating money out of thin air, and also that economic stability requires a little inflation. Such ideas for decades have been holy writ in official Washington. Inflation shows why they are misguided. The book also explains why the current rage for heedless money printing advocated by left-wing advocates of so-called modern monetary theory is likely to lead the nation and the world down the road to disaster. Packed with examples from the headlines and from history, Inflation is a unique, real-world exploration of the subject that addresses everyday concerns of Americans under the siege by rising prices, including steps you should take to protect your wealth. Inflation is essential reading for everyone seeking to navigate these tumultuous times. Please welcome author Nathan Lewis. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hello, good to be here.
Absolutely. Certainly an important book for our times. And you had quite a time constraint on you to get out the book immediately while people wanted it. Was that difficult for you and for your co-authors?
Not so much. I think along with many people who have been paying attention, we kind of figured out that the really extraordinary over-the-top reaction of governments and central banks in 2020, which we all read about, was going to have a fairly predictable consequence. And already in early 2021, we said, you know what? We're going to have this some form of this problem. Didn't quite work out the way we expected, but some form of inflation problem. And we were Steve Forbes and myself, we've been involved in this stuff for decades, and we just remember, well, I don't remember personally, but Steve does, and I read about it, and all the stupid things that were thrown about in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s, and in the 2000s about inflation. Obviously, the experts are all over the map, still are today. You probably noticed. They're just talking about different things, right? One's talking about Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the other guy's talking about Federal Reserve's interest rates. Like, well, what's going on here, right? And so we needed a book that was going to hopefully, at least build a framework by which people could understand these things. Because if you don't have a framework, you just have babble. But if you do have a framework, then you can start fixing problems, and hopefully we will fix those problems in time.
Certainly. So you saw that inflation was going to be the buzzword of 2022 early enough that you could get it written in time. Good for you.
Yeah, it was supposed to be a short, simple book, and it is a short, simple book. It's only 120 pages or so of the main text, but it turned out to be quite complicated. We thought that we had chewed over the stuff, in decades. I've written 4 previous books, mostly about monetary economics, and Forbes has written about this stuff for 40 years. We thought we knew everything. We thought we kind of would be able to do this pretty easily, but as we started to think about it, we just kind of recalled all the issues, all the things that economists say that aren't really true, and all the channels of public policy debate that tend to happen but are kind of unproductive, which we're having right now, right? The big solution to inflation is more unemployment, because if we don't have a job, that we don't have any money, and then we can't buy stuff, and that makes prices go down. That's kind of a stupid idea. You know that, right? But that's what we're doing. Why are we doing this? Because we're in the habit of it, basically, right? There are many people like me saying it sounds kind of dumb, but they just kind of going on with it because they're sort of well-worn paths that have people having trouble getting out of their ruts that they've been in for the last 50 years.
I'm so glad you mentioned a page count, because it's such important reading for all of us who are living, just hearing, like you said, we hear sound bites, and inflation, your book, is there to provide that basis for all of us who did not study this to digest, to understand. Can we get a copy of this to every single congressman who's voting? Is that a thing?
Well, we hope to write something that a congressman would actually read. And we also, and as we were thinking about this, we said, we think this is a topic that regular people can understand. They're kind of taught like, oh, only the expert can figure this out. But no, we think actually regular people can figure this out. And it's actually not that complicated. And the other thing that we noticed is that, they're all, but at the same time, we're not just sort of delivering conventional wisdom, which is mostly wrong. We also wanted to sort of wrestle with, issues in macroeconomics that remain contentious. So deal with it on that expert level as well. But I can try to kind of summarize some of the arguments in the book, and it is actually so easy. You're kind of like, is that it? Is that all there is to it? I mean, isn't there more to it than that? Nope, that's it. And I'll tell you what they are. We kind of, even on the cover, we say, what is inflation? Because there seems to be a lot of disagreement about that. All there is really consensus about is that it has something to do with a broad rise in prices. And so there have been attempts in the past to define inflation more specifically, but no one cares what they think. So we just kind of have to deal with it at that level. And it's real simple. Prices can have this sort of broad-based rise for 2 basic reasons, or 2 basic cause and effect processes. One is basically monetary. It's basically the responsibility of the central bank or whoever the monetary authorities are. It doesn't really have anything to do with all the other stuff. And then the other is all the other stuff. And this is all the supply and demand things we all know about. There's a relative shortage of oil, and then prices are going to go up. The relative shortage of housing in certain key popular locales, housing prices are going to go up. Labor market's pretty tight. Well, okay, then you get a raise. That's not a bad thing. And so these are supply and demand effects, not necessarily related to the currency. And this is not hard to understand. And we're having both of these right now. We've had really exceptional central bank activity and spending activity by governments. And then we have all these issues that we've talked about in the newspapers and so forth. And okay, That's not that complicated. But you might be surprised to find that, the experts, they tend to specialize. They tend to specialize in one or the other. They're either a specialist in supply demand stuff and they ignore the monetary things, or there's a specialist in monetary things and they say, oh, it's all monetary. It's like, well, we had COVID, we had supply. I mean, car dealers' lots are not empty today because of something that the Federal Reserve did. But you can't get it through the thick heads. That's why we have to address regular people who you can say obvious things to them and they say, oh yes, that's obvious. Believe it or not, this, anyway. And so that's the basic idea. And when we think about the most pernicious, the most dangerous, the most destructive, have the greatest long-term effects are undoubtedly the monetary side. And we all kind of understand this because from ages ago, we've been playing this same old game. The first coins in the very old times, the Sumerian age, the Babylonian period, let's say second millennium BC, gold and silver traded as money, but it was pretty much they just weigh it. They just put on a scale and they say, that shipment, that cartload of wheat, will cost you a mina, a pound of silver, whatever it is. And they just put on a scale and they weighed it. It didn't really change. Nothing the government can do about it, just weights and measures. And then they started to make coins and they say, well, a coin is worth a drachma or whatever it is. And the first thing they did is they started to reduce the silver in the coin, right? The first coin is 10 grams of silver, then it's got 7 grams of silver, then it's got 3 grams of silver. And they're paying the soldiers, oh, you get 1 coin. It's like, yeah, your coins used to have 10 grams of silver. Now it's only got 3 grams. Guess what? It takes more coins to buy things when you do that. And that's inflation. And that's what we did 2,600 years ago and continuously since then. And then since the 17th century, we replaced the coins with paper and it's all become very virtual. And then we in many cases replaced the paper with some kind of digital account. And so it's all very virtual, but the basic idea is the same. Your money loses value. And for thousands of years, the idea was good governments didn't do that. Good governments, the amount of gold in our coins didn't change from century to century. And that was the gold standard system. And the United States had the same thing. The value of the US dollar in terms of gold did not change from the day we signed the Constitution until about 1933. There were some goofy periods like during the Civil War, but it is more or less unchanged. And then there was one devaluation in 33, and we kept with the same system until 71. And now we have this floating fiat currency system. The value of our dollar today is about 1/50th, I estimate, certainly compared to gold, of what it was worth during the Kennedy administration. We took a lot of the silver out of the coin, had the same effects as Henry VIII did when he did the same thing back in the 16th century. Mm-hmm. And people understand this because we've been doing it for generations. People understand this. But oddly, and not very surprisingly, one of the outcomes of this burst of money creation that central banks engaged in 2020 was a decline in currency values worldwide. But strangely enough, that's the one thing we never talk about. When's the last time you read about that in the Wall Street Journal? Oh, currency value declined. Then markets adjust, takes more money to buy things. They talk about money supply, they talk about interest rates, they talk about blah, 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 but they never said that. Which is kind of interesting. And people, that is always been the focus of American economic policy, global economic policy for centuries. It's the one thing we don't talk about. And
like that, it makes so much sense.
Yeah. And we had a way, and in the old days, which was not that long ago, 1960s, you said, yeah, governments that do that get into trouble because it screws up the economy. They used to compare the weights and measures. Actually, anyway, this is a very common comparison. If the length of the foot changed like our currency changed, and the length of the foot was 10% less next year than it was this year, then all business would have to somehow deal with this thing, right? All the promises that a foot was this would have to be renegotiated and all that sort of thing. And that's kind of what happens to the economy when your currency changes value. Right. And so once you figure that out, don't do that. What's the solution to inflation? Yeah, don't do that. Don't take the silver out of the coins. Don't have a floating fiat currency, paper, digital, whatever that drops in value, like ours has over the last 50 years. But we have a 2-cent dollar. Don't do that, and you won't have a problem. And the solution to that has always been historically, for the last 2,000 years. I wrote a book about this. link your currency to gold. And most countries actually do this today. They have their own homegrown central bank. Well, they used to have their own homegrown central bankers. They used to have their own floating fiat currencies, and they had the same old problem. They had the same problems that we have today. And they said, well, yeah, we're not going to do that. And they linked their currencies typically to the dollar or the euro because, it separated from domestic politics.
Okay.
You can no longer print Peruvian Nuevos Sol to fund the military, whatever. Adjust domestic interest rates in Italy before the euro to win the next election, and all this kind of stuff. They said, no, take it out of our hands. Just link our currency to the euro, because euro is not the greatest thing in the world, but it's better than we used to have. And it's the same basic process. In human history, there's really only been two solutions. There's some variant of gold standard, or which we use in the United States for almost 2 centuries, very successful. Or there's the eggheads with PhDs make it up as they go along system. And, haven't you noticed that in 50 years, none of the eggheads can agree on anything? Haven't you noticed they're always content? They're never going to agree on anything. It's always going to be just them like having arguments and making stuff up. Right?
Nobody agrees on anything. Not
Yeah.
People disagree.
Yes.
But on the other hand, there are countries in the past that have managed to stick with gold for over 700 years in some cases. There are many countries today that are able to link their currency to the dollar or euro for decades very successfully. It's politically possible. Humans can do this. 10 economists in a room will never come to any consensus about anything for 10 minutes. And the outcome of that is just kind of a currency that is kind of random, chaotic, tends to decline in value over time. And so we're getting into a time now where we've had this sort of chronic low level currency depreciation over the last 50 years since the 60s. I go to a room and say, you guys, monetary economics is complicated, but you guys remember a barrel of oil in the 1960s cost $3. Baby boomers go, yeah, I do remember that. And you say, in the 1990s, barrel oil cost $20. And oil companies were profitable. They're fine. They made money. Gen X people go, yeah, I remember that. I could fill up my car for 85 cents a gallon. Yeah, it was okay. Now it's $100. And no oil company on earth can make a buck below $50. It's just not economic. What's going on? And they say, well, obviously the currency is worth less. And that's the basic process, and that's all we're ever going to have. That's the PhD standard. That's what's going to happen, right? And that can accelerate. Is accelerated in other countries many times. Very common. We take extreme examples like Venezuela, but you could look at Italy before the euro. You could look at Greece. You could look at India. It's the same thing but less. You could look at Mexico. Example we have in our book. The Mexican peso used to be worth 3 pesos to the dollar. And then in the early 90s, you go to Cancun, you get your $5 beers, you go up to the bar, it's 15 pesos, $5 beer. Now you walk to the airports, 20 pesos to the dollar, you go get your resort in Cancun, your $5 beer costs 100 pesos. What happened? Well, they didn't have hyperinflation, but what has happened to Mexico in a little more accelerated way is the same thing that happens to us. And then that's the longer term process of inflation. Which now I think threatens to accelerate, because for the first time in a long, long time, actually in the United States history, the first time since the 1780s, since the Continental Congress financed the American Revolution by printing banknotes out of nothing, we're now getting a situation where it's not just about managing the unemployment, not just about managing interest rates, not just about, fooling around with the economy. It's getting down to just straight up government financing, right?
No, I get that.
And there's a certain political process to this, right? It's every country that does this knows it's a bad thing to do. It's like the heroin user with the needle in his arm. It's like, I heard this is a bad idea. I probably shouldn't have a needle in my arm,
right?
But they do it.
But the countries, well,
and we're kind of getting to that needle in the arm period. It seems to me, and everyone kind of understands this. But we're either going to have to prevent it, which in my view is not too likely, or we're going to have a solution afterwards And the solution afterwards, when we did this, I hyperinflated the currency in the 1780s after the Revolutionary War, is we wrote a constitution that said, don't do that.
Well,
And it
our
worked for a time.
step as readers is to understand it, and for that we have inflation, which I am so grateful. So I think I might know the answer to this for you, Nathan. But let's start with Thomas. Thomas, tell me, who would be the person to buy your book for today? If I were going to go shopping, shall we say, and say, who am I going to get a copy of The Great Convergence for? Can you describe the reader who I should be shopping for?
Well, I did have a reader in mind when I wrote the Great Convergence. It turned out that everybody buys it. I mean, I thought it's going to be mostly intellectuals living in an ivory tower. Turns out, and mostly men. It turns out that it's actually very popular with women and young people too. I think if you look for something that's different, subversive, something that will make you think that this is the type of reader my book would be attractive to.
Also,
If you like a strange kind of humor, if you want to, it's not an airport book. It's not something you just breeze through. You basically, it's like I don't know, like a cake. You just taste it and put it aside and taste a little bit more, and I don't know, have a few laughs
I like that. I like that, and good description. Joseph, same question to you. If I'm going shopping today, who should I be thinking about to purchase a copy of the Zodiac for?
Well, I think that anybody who's interested in astrology, who's already got an idea of what those stars are and something that relates to our history. I also think that it would apply to anybody who's interested in human civilization or the beginnings and origins of human history. That's where I found my biggest challenge thus far. Trying to find an academic, there is no discipline about the Zodiac. There's no professor of the Zodiac. Maybe I might be the first one, if you will. Right. And but trying to get that out there, that this is our true history. And it's something eventually I would hope down the line that every school kid would come to learn. This is how it happened. No magic, no, nothing of that nature. Very simple, natural process. Most of the theories that we have about our history are true, but the Zodiac tells us the timeline. And I think everybody should need to know it. So I guess anybody should read. Anybody who wants to know why we're here and what's it all about should enjoy this book.
Fantastic, thank you. And Nathan, who should I be buying a copy of Inflation for today when I go shopping?
Well, we wrote this book just for the interested, reasonably intelligent average person, high school student, stay-at-home mom, even a congressman if he has time, and someone engaged in business. And because we think that you can understand these things and you can actually understand it better than most economists. And we also think that this is going to be necessary if we're going to have, it's going to be necessary for just average people to understand these things, if we're going to have some kind of positive solution to these kind of problems.
Makes sense, makes sense. But thank you for mentioning the, I'll say the reading level of it, which is, especially with the subject matter, definitely helpful. Well, for all three of you, we definitely have things to be reading and learning about. So I can't thank you enough for joining me today on Between the Covers. And when your next book comes out, please join us and send any materials along if you're doing any appearances so that we can share them with our audiences. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.